Currently, I am working in EY. So basically, today we will cover variable argument and imports. Okay, this topic we will cover in this session. For the entire session, I will be your moderator, and we have Gitanjali Mishra from Infosys with us. So she will be the speaker. Okay, so I will hand it over this to Gitanjali. Okay, so you can take it from now.
Yeah, thanks, Shukla.
Thank you.
Hi all. How you all doing today? You guys can unmute yourself, say how you're doing. Let's have an interactive session today. So everybody's doing good, I hope. Okay, great. Yeah, I'll start with a quick introduction of myself. I'm Gitanjali Mishra. I am a technology analyst at Infosys, and I have been working in the RPA domain for the past 3.5 years. This was the starting technology for me, and I've been working on RPA literally my entire career. Yeah, so moving on to today's session, we will be talking about variables, arguments, and inputs. I hope everybody has UiPath Studio up and running already. Can I get a yes or a no so that we can, start doing some practicals today, have a little bit of interaction. I see a yes. Is only one person having studio today? Okay, perfect. Yeah, I see responses. Okay, let me share my screen. Let me know if you have any audio screen sharing issues immediately so that I can just quickly fix them and we can continue.
All perfect, Gitanjali.
Okay, perfect. So what are we going to learn in today's session? We are going to understand what variables are and what they are used for. We're going to do some practical exercises, work with variables within an automation project and see what variables basically do. Yeah. Then we're going to understand what arguments are and what are they used for. And then we're going to understand the differences between variables and arguments. Then we're going to see how we can use variables and arguments within a multi-workflow kind of a scenario. And and the best practices, how you're supposed to basically use a variable, use an argument, and all the industry level best practices that you should follow in an automation project. Okay. Moving on to variables. So what are variables? So for any kind of processing, right, we need to, what do we do in a processing, whether it's an automation processing or any kind of software, how do we process stuff? We basically process data, right? And we need a place or an entity that can hold this data, right? So that's what variables are. Variables are just basically containers that can hold multiple data entries of the same data type. I'm going to come to what data types are. So for example, email address, that's a data, right? So how do I hold this data in a particular place? So that's where variables come in. So how can variables change? Also, one thing about data is a certain data can change over time or after processing something, or for any X amount of reasons, a data can change. So the role of variables is to keep on updating itself with the latest version of the data or whatever is the latest thing about the data, right? So how can a variable change? It can change through external input. So for example, if we're talking about email address and I put in a different email address, this rpdeveloper@uipath.com will change. Or what we can do is we can do some data manipulation on this. Let's say we carry out a data manipulation where we remove all the E's from this particular email address, then the email address variable will change. Or what can happen is we take this variable and we pass it to some other processing workflow altogether, and something happens there. So the variable can change again, right? So why variables are important? Variables help us pass the data from one activity to another or from one workflow to another, also in combination with arguments. And if we are doing any sort of automation, especially in UiPath in general, moving ahead without any container of the data will become impossible. Okay. Any questions up until now? You can just start putting them into the chat. Okay. Now, how do we create these variables in our automation studio? So I hope everybody has some sort of project open. If you don't, you can just create a project quickly so that you can, start doing all of this with me. I will show you how we are going to create variables in an automation project, one after the other. Okay. So the first one is from the variables panel. So if you see, once you create a project, you're going to have one workflow open for you, right? Which is going to also contain a main or a basic sequence, right? So I guess yesterday we discussed about sequences and workflows, right? So we're going to start off from here itself. So you see there is a small box called variables. If you expand that, going to see a lot of variables already created. Let me just delete that and start fresh. Yeah. So once you open this variables panel, you're going to see there are no variables right now, right? So what we can do is we can just click on create variable and we can create a variable here. Let's say we create anything, first name, right? I'm going to come to these columns as well. Let me just first quickly show you what are the different ways of creating a variable, and then we're going to jump into all of that. So this was how we can create variables from the variable panel. Okay. Now coming to from expressions. So what basically it means is, you see this assign statement. Let me drag and drop that here. An assign statement is basically kind of an, you can say, an equal to action that you can carry out using an assign. So here, let's say I want to create another variable and I don't want to use my first name. I can click on, this is where I'm going to put my variable name, and this is where I'm going to put the value I want to assign the variable. So what I have to do is I have to click Control plus K. So you see, it has popped up a set variable. Here I can put in, let's say, second name. Oops, second name, and hit enter. So this also created a variable for me. Now, if I go to variables panel, you see my second name is also here. So variables panel will continuously show you the list of all of your variables. Okay. Let's assign some information to it. Anything. Let's say I just give my last name here. Yeah. So this is the second type of creating variables. Now, what is the third type? That is the creating variables from the properties panel. Now I'm going to bring in the assign statement once again, or you can use something else as well. Let's say we use a write line, which is basically your, like a print line kind of a thing. So, sorry, my bad. Control Z. Don't use write line right now. Yeah. So for assign, let's say if you see here on your right, you'll see a couple of panels. So open the properties panel. So this is also a way to, extract or, access everything that is happening within any activity. And this is valid for all activities that you see here. Okay. So within the assign activity, let's say we'll do the same thing, Control plus K. Let's give a middle name, right? Oops, did the Control K did not happen? Okay. Doing a Control K again, putting in middle name, enter. Okay. Oh, I'm putting it into set variable. Sorry, my bad. You have to put it in two variable. Yep. Let's give any default value. And we're done. So we have three different types or three different ways we can create variables. Okay. Yep. Before moving on to configuring variables, any questions here? Has anybody tried making variables on their own in their studios?
Guys, please feel free to reach out to Gitanjali of any question, any doubt you have. Okay, otherwise you will fall to understand the logics. Okay, so just reach out to Gitanjali now.
So I have one question.
Mm-hmm. So you're not audible, whoever is asking.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so we are creating a variable, right? So every time we need to print control plus K, or directly we can just put a variable name.
No, if you directly put a variable name, that will not work. Like, for example, I can show you. If I just put in anything here, let's say school name, is going to give me an error, right? That this is not declared. So we always have to declare the variable first. And how do we declare the variable? Either we press Control K here in any of the activities, or we go into the variables panel and carry that out.
Thanks.
Okay. If there are no more questions, shall I move ahead? I see no further questions. Okay. Moving on. Yeah. Configuring variables. So just, just having data containers is not going to serve all of our purposes. We need further properties of a variable. And what we have here is we can configure those further properties as well to, fit our needs. So the first thing we've already covered, one of the properties is the name of the variable, which we have set up here. The second property is the type of the variable. What is a type? I believe most of you kind of understand what are, there are numbers, there are text types of information. There are different types of information, right? There can be tables, there can be a lot of different things, decimals, integers, whatever, right? So that basically kind of is what type is. That's what it encompasses. And you will find that in this second column, the variable type. So here you see, since these are all text types, the variable type is string. And by default, what UiPath gives us is whenever we create a variable, by default, it is first of the string variable. So if we want to change the variable type of any of our variables, let's say I want to create a number variable, let's say age. So you see by default, this is string, but I don't want my age to be a string. I want it to be a number. What I do, I can just click on the variable type and select the kind of type I want. So this one will be an integer type. So I can just select in 32. Okay. Now another cool thing about, the variable type is you can see Boolean, you can see int32, string, object, data table, arrays we can set up. I want to show you all the different types of, data types we can have. So if there is anything you can't find in this drop down, you can go into browse for types and you can start searching for that. So for example, if I want to have a dictionary or anything of that sort, we can find that. So let's say this is the dictionary. And what kind of a dictionary I want? I want a dictionary of strings, right? Or if you want, you can have decimal points or date times. I want to store a date time. I want to store time for something. I can put that. Okay. This would be system dot date time. Yep. System dot date time. Right. So we can change the variable type from going into browse for types. We can create arrays as well. We can, mark our variables as arrays. What we have to do is we have to select array of t, which means we have to give what t is. Do we want an array of integers? We want array of string, whatever. So this is how you can, configure and fine tune your variables to suit your needs. Okay. So that is the variable type. Then there is a default value. We'll come to the scope later. So what the default value is, as the name suggests, we can have any sort of information here that the automation will use in case another value for this variable is not given. So for example, let's say I just have Keith here, right? So if I don't have a first name given here, right, I have not used an assign statement here. But still, if I put in a default value, my automation will know, okay, no assign for first names, we're going to use the default value. So it's going to take up Keith. Okay.
But you have not assigned the first name as well, right?
Yeah. So here you see, since we have not assigned the first name using an assign statement, what the automation is going to do is going to take up the default value. Let's say you've not put in any default value as well. It's going to go as an empty string. Do you understand like an empty string or a null value?
No.
Okay. Let me just run this. Let's say we have Keith, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just going to put in right line here, put in a first name. This is my let me use a message box. Okay, never mind. Yeah, let me run this process. So you see, we don't have an assign statement for the first name. But here I am printing the first name, right? Now let me just run this. Yeah. In my output, you see, it has printed Geet.
Okay.
Okay. So what did it do? It extracted information from here. Now, if I don't give anything, right? And then I run it. You see, it did not give me anything. It's empty, right? Because we don't have a default value and neither do we have an assign statement here. So nothing has been assigned. This variable is basically empty right now. Okay. Okay. All these three are complete now. Moving to scope. Before I move to scope, any further questions?
What type we have to choose for the, I mean, you have chosen second name as a string, right? When we have to choose array of string, or when we have to choose int?
It kind of will depend on your needs, right?
Yeah.
It would depend on what automation you're doing. Okay, let's say, when do we use arrays? We use arrays when we have to store a collection of information, right? A collection of same type of information. That's what basically arrays are. So you can Google up arrays, see what they basically do. These are kind of like, foundational concepts that are kind of uniform all across all technologies, all coding languages. So what arrays do are basically, we can have a collection of same type of data. So for example, all of you are here, right? So I can have an array that contains the name of all of your names in one variable. Okay.
Can you share an example? Create an example.
Let's say, let's give students. Okay. I will create this as an array of string. Okay. Now we can use the default as well, or we can use the assign statement. Students. Now in UiPath, what we have to, so you see, when you are going to, so for a string value, for the assign statement, UiPath is identifying what is the data type. So for this second one, middle name, if I go into open an advanced editor, this is nothing but just an, expanded version of this part. So it's clearer for you to code and stuff. You see, it's telling you set value of a string, which is basically a text. Now, if I open this and open in advanced editor, you can see string, and then there is a open and close box bracket, right? So whenever
Because
you
you
say
have type, that's how it is showing, right?
yeah, so this is how you understand, okay, this is an array, or it is asking for an array. Now, how do you create an array? Is you just put in curly braces, and then these are names, right? Let's give name as, there's a student called ABC. Then we put in a comma. We put in a student called Sovano, right? We put in a student called Shukla. We put in Keep. Okay. So as you can see, all of these are string data type informations, right? Now, if I put in a number here, let's say 12, this is going to throw me an error, right? That 12 is not the same data type as the rest of this. And that is not what the students variable is configured to accept. So once I remove that, it's going to remove. So when you have a collection, there are different ways of storing collections as well. Dictionary is one, data tables are one, different ways. Lists, it's a lot of different types of variables and data types. You can, just search them up, see how they work. But that is how an array works, right? If you want the age to be an array as well, we can have an array of integers. Array of int. Okay. Here, let's use the default value. Same approach, put in curly braces, put in different ages, any random ages, and it's going to take that. Okay. Understood up until now?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, arrays are just, collection of homogeneous data or collection of the same type of data. Okay. Okay, now moving on to scope. So,
excuse me, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Can we create a variable during runtime?
During runtime, no, I don't think so. What we can do is we can check the values of these variables during runtime, but we cannot create new variables during runtime. So just a little quick tip I can give you. These breakpoints and stuff you're going to learn later, but I'm just putting a breakpoint to pause the automation at this point. So let's say I'm running this, right? I believe, yeah. So within this locals, right, you can see all of the information, what my variables are holding. So first name is null because we have not used any assign statements. Middle name has M. Oh, so middle name is not processed yet. It is still here. So middle name does not have anything, right? Middle name is null. If I just process middle name activity, it now has the value M, right? So you can check your variables in this format within this, this kind of tab. What you can do is further if you have a very large complex automation and you want to keep track of a certain variable, what you can do is you can type those variables in here to just specifically check that, because scrolling and finding out variables might get difficult. If you have a 1,000 lines of code, 2,000 lines of code, it's going to get difficult. So you can keep a watch on those, right? And immediate also, I think that is the same kind of an approach. It's going to give you the value, okay? But not at runtime.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Hello.
We were talking, yeah.
In variable type, the data type which is int32, what is 32 stands for?
So integer, I think it's a 32-bit, int 32-bit, right? Shukla, I'm not very confident, but
Yes, that's
yeah.
represent the bits 32, 64.
Yeah. So basically, if you kind of Google up a little bit more about bits and bytes and all of that kind of information, you'll see that these are all integers with this. Basically what int32 means is it's going to take integers using 32 bits. Then we have the int64 as well. If you search this up here, int64, yeah. So you see, we have int64. It's 64 and 32. It represents bits within the computer. So basically, what I understand is 32 and 64, these are the storage type. It's going to take up 32 bits of storage.
Yeah.
And 64 bits of storage. So that's basically what this 32 represents.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, we'll move on to this and you guys can keep noting your questions down. We have a Q&A session at the end of the session as well. Moving on to scope. What scope basically does is it's going to tell you up until what point of your automation is your variable going to be valid. So within an automation, especially a very complex automation, what happens is many times we use a sequence, we use a subsequence, then we go into a completely different workflow altogether, we come back, then further use another sequence, use flowcharts. It gets complicated, right? So what we basically do is we tell UiPath, or we tell a variable that, hey, your work ends after this particular sequence. You are not required any further. So that variable ceases to exist after that particular sequence. How? I'll show you. So let's say let's put in another sequence here. Let me just remove a little bit of noise from here. Oh, sorry. I've put in another sequence here, okay? Let's call it a subsequence. Now I put in an assign here. I create a new variable here. Let's say, give me a variable name. I'm really bad at naming variables. Anybody? Anything?
var1.
var1. Okay, great. Let's go with the basics.
No,
right?
actually, variable 1, variable 2, that's very bad naming convention. We can go with the name. Okay, the variable
Okay.
name, that should be a specific variable name.
Yeah. So anything, guys,
Maybe
any particular?
order ID, employee name, that should be
Okay.
fine.
Okay. Student name.
Student name,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't use variable 1, variable 2. When you will be developing some code, there will be 100,000 of activities involved in this code or process, so you will lost in variable 1 and variable 2. So your variable should represent the exact word. So student name or student ID, order ID, this should be the thing. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Shukla. Okay. So I've just taken student name from our participants. Okay, just randomly given that person, and I've assigned a variable to that. Now, if I open the variables panel, removing this var1, if we go down, student, where did student go? Yeah. If you see student name, what is the scope? The scope is subsequence. It means beyond this subsequence, if I try to do a right line, okay, so subsequence ends here. Now if I try to even find the student name, I'm not going to find it. It's not going to come up. Why? The validity of the student name variable ends here, ends with whatever sequence or scope as we call it ends. So since we have subsequence here, it's going to end here. Now, how scope works is, this is kind of a nested scenario, right? We have a main sequence and within that we have a subsequence. So what happens is, I'm getting some echo. Yeah. So what happens is, I'm getting more echo.
I think Sindhu, you can mute yourself. I think that's fine.
Okay, yeah. So whatever we have at the highest, hierarchy of the sequences, let's say the second name and middle name, these are variables created within main sequence, right? So these will be valid within subsequence, but variables created within subsequence will not be valid within the main sequence, because their maximum range of territory is the subsequence itself. They cannot, exist beyond these. So if I try to, just drag this in and try to find middle name within the subsequence, you're going to find that. Okay. This concept is clear, works for everybody. Any doubts here?
Hello.
Yeah.
Can I change the scope of the variable? If suppose some variable is present in subsequence, so can I send it to main sequence?
Right. Good question. I was going to come to that. So how do we change the scope of any variable? What we do is same, we go into our variables panel, click on the scope for that particular, and you can see it will give you the hierarchy directly. So, the smallest sequence will be at the top and the larger ones will keep on coming at the bottom. So if we want, we can make it a main sequence. And now if I just go here, beyond the subsequence, if I try to find student name, I'm getting student name now, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So that is how we work with variables, and we can play around with these variables. Okay, so that ends variables. Any questions for variables, or we can move into arguments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there any generic type of variable?
Generic as in?
Means I don't define the data type of the variable, but when I run or when I provide the data, depending on the data type will be changed.
Yeah, for that, I think we can use this data type object. Object also works as a generic value. For that, I guess, we have to put in some new string kind of a thing, right? Let me just see if this works. New string. Yeah. So this will work here. Okay.
Sorry, guys, just to add up, I mean, I think we also have a type known as generic, so we can also use that. We will be able to get that, in the browse types, and maybe if you type generic once, Gitanjali, maybe you will be able to get that. Yes.
System.data.generic.
Yeah. Could you come down a little? Generic value, UiPath.code.generic value. Yes.
Yeah.
So here what happens is on runtime, it will decide which type of value it is, and based on that, it is going to assign itself.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we no need to assign the type for this generic.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to arguments. So what are arguments? They also are pretty much similar to variables. They hold data, they hold information, and they also have data types, and they also have default values, and they do all of the things pretty much similar to how variables work. The only difference between arguments and variables is they come with a direction, okay, which is in, out, or and in, out. Okay. So when do we use arguments? Yeah. Let's say I have a project, right? And I just have one automation file present here. So yesterday we discussed about workflows and sequences, right? Let's say I add in a new workflow here. This would be my sub workflow. Okay. And I start automating stuff or putting in my code here. Like, for example, I create variables here as well. I can put in, a university name and stuff like that. So now let's say I want to, what is it? ABC University, right? I want to use the names and the first names and whatever I've used here. I want to use those in my sub workflow as well. Now, if you see, my main workflow and sub workflow are not connected in any way, right? So if I go to sub workflow, the variables I created in main, they are not present here. Everything is empty. Just the university name that I created, that's here, right? So that is when we use arguments. So within arguments, if we create an argument, you can see it comes with a direction, in, out, like that. Okay. So we will start creating arguments. I think I covered everything here. Yeah. Why are they important? When we have a, very huge automation where we are working with multiple workflows, we don't, stuff everything into one particular XAML file. We create multiple workflows so that we can, create chunks of the automation and have a smooth running automation that goes from one workflow to another, then goes back, stuff like that. When we have to create a complex workflow automation, we use workflows, and when we have to transfer data between these automations, we use arguments. Okay.
I have one question, Geetanjali.
Yeah.
How it recognized argument as in? So you have declared in the main as well? The same argument you did?
No, so declaring in and out, that we can do from the arguments panel. Okay. So here,
Okay, can
the
you show
same
me?
thing, we click on the direction. It gives us the drop down. We can put an in, out, or in out. We're going to discuss further on these, but that's how we basically give the direction.
How it recognizes that in and out? Because while creating the variable, it doesn't show that, right?
Yeah, so if I create a variable, by default, it puts an in. Then, if you are actually creating an out argument or anything of that sort, you can then further configure your argument as per your need. But by default, like for variables, how we saw when we create a variable, by default, it just gives it a string, right? The same way, when we create an argument, by default, it gives it as an indirection. And the argument type is also by default string. But we can then further configure it as per our need.
Okay, so adding with this answer, basically here you can see main and sub workflow, right? So from main, we are sending those particular variables in sub workflow, right? Because here the first name, middle name, that is not present. So we have to bring it from main XAML. So for that, they are bringing from main. That's why we are creating this argument name, argument direction in. If let's say there will be some argument in sub workflow, we need to send it to main, then that will be out. That is the basic knowledge in and out. I hope your doubt is clear now.
Yes. Super. Yes, thank you.
There is a fourth in the direction property. How does that work?
So for property, sure,
yeah,
please
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so properties, I think this will just, this will not create any direction for you. So this will just, basically act like a normal container of information. This will not send out any information from this workflow or bring in any further information.
So can we say that it's just a variable, a kind of variable?
Kind of, yeah. But what happens with this is we talked about scope, right? The scope is, the entire thing. So the entire workflow will have this argument valid throughout its, function.
It will work within the sub workflow.
Okay, so can we pass that? I mean, without mentioning the in-out direction, can we pass that value to that property argument?
No, so if we have property, I don't think we can pass the information, pass any information into that
we
argument.
have to set the direction in, out, or in or out, this thing to pass the value.
Okay, so property will work exactly as variable then.
Yeah, it should. I think I've never used properties as such. Let me search that up as well. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, this one is done. Creating arguments. What we can do is same steps, just that instead of Control K for variables, what we can do is we can use Control plus M for in arguments or Control Shift M for out arguments. Okay. So let's try that out. I'll put in Control M. So I'm getting a pop-up set argument. So I can give as address. Okay. Now, since I selected Control M, it created an argument of direction in. Same goes for Control Shift M. Is going to create an argument of out. Okay.
First, we can create a name and later can we create whether it's in or out? Is
Yeah,
it possible?
we can do that as well. So let's say we just want to create and we create any arguments, right? Town or anything. Then we can choose what direction we want to put in using this in, out, and out. Okay.
You clicked on the argument section, right? If I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
this argument. So right next to variables, we have arguments. Yeah, this is where we use. This is what we use to configure the arguments. Okay.
For variables creation, Control K, right? For arguments creation,
Control M. Control M
okay.
if you want to create in arguments, or Control Shift M if you want to create out arguments.
Okay.
Okay. Same thing is valid for arguments as well. We can go into properties panel, create arguments from here as well, right? I'm not going to spend much time. We don't have much time here. Properties panel we've covered. Okay. And the arguments panel. So all three types we've covered. Expressions, we can use assign statements, whatever statements we want. Then properties and this arguments panel. These are the three ways we can create arguments. Okay. Now, how do we pass information to and fro using these arguments? Okay. Let's test that out. Let's say we can have a right line here. What are the things we created? We created a city, right? Yeah. So I have one argument as city. I have one argument as town. I have one argument as address. Okay. Town and address are in direction. City is out direction. Let me put in an address here as well. Or like town. Yeah. Now I go to my main flow. Okay. Here what I will do is I will use an activity called Invoke Workflow. Invoke Workflow file. I'm going to drag and drop that here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my workflow. This is the sub workflow we created, right? So I've now selected my sub workflow. Now if I do an import arguments, you can see the arguments we had created into our workflow, right? Address, city, town, these are coming here. Now we can basically send information from our main workflow into a sub workflow. So basically what's going to happen is we're going to inject information into this. What UiPath is going to do is from main, it's going to call the sub workflow and then carry out whatever activities there are. Okay. Now, if you see in import arguments, we have this space called value. So in address, which are in directions, we can put in whatever value we want. Okay. Address, let's say, give me an address, guys, anything, 15 MG Road or something. Okay. Town, we can have, let's say, Kolkata. And city is in out direction, right? What in and out means? In, we are sending information into this workflow. Out direction means we are receiving information from that workflow. Okay. So what we can do is we can create a variable, let's say here as well, main workflow city. This is our variable. Sorry for the typo, but yeah. This is our variable that's going to store the information, whatever the sub workflow sends, it's going to store that information into itself. And let's have a right line here. Main workflow city. Okay. Do we have everything here? City, yeah. So for city, let's give some value. City is ABC, that's fine. And let's run this. I'll put in breakpoints or basically pause the automation from place to place so that you can see how things are, moving from here and there. So I'll run the automation. Okay, we don't have anything called student name. Sorry, my bad. So it threw an error. Student name does not have anything. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So up until here, let's see what all we have. You see, within our locals panel also, we can't see the arguments that we have, right? We can just see the variables. So up until here, if I, basically do city, it's not going to show me anything because these are not visible here. We go in, we run this. Sorry, my bad. I'll show it again. Oh, not here. Okay. Now, what is the value of town? Town we passed something, right? Yep. Town we passed as Kolkata. What is the value of city? City we passed as ABC. So we've assigned that city here. So city has ABC now. Okay. Now if we come out of here and we print main workflow city, which is mapped, basically city has been thrown into main workflow, right? So we get ABC again. Okay. So understanding the concepts of in, out, stuff like that. Any doubts, any confusion up until
Out
here?
again.
Sorry?
Can you repeat out again?
Yeah. So what basically out is doing is we can basically information passing, right? We can send information from main to sub workflow, and we can send back information from sub workflow to main, right? It's a to and fro kind of a thing, vice versa. So when we are sending information from one workflow into another when we have used Invoke workflow file, basically when we need some information inside this from an outside source, what we use is we use in. Okay. But if we want to send out some information out of our, sub workflow into whatever had called this workflow, we want to send back some information, what we use is out. Okay, kind of understanding or still not very clear?
It is clear now. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Yep. So that is how in out work. Now coming to in out. Okay. Let's put city as in out. Okay. Now what in out basically is, we can, for in out direction, we can have information come as input, process that information within the same argument, and then send that new information back to the main workflow. That is basically the direction. So it's kind of a bidirectional. It's going to take in information as well as give out information. Okay. So let's say we'll put in main workflow city again. So since we changed the direction of this argument, you see, it started giving me a yellow kind of warning where it's telling me, okay, you need to remap your variable or information for this because the direction changed. So I'm just going to put in main workflow city again here, and I'm going to assign main workflow city as I had ABC here. Let's do CED. Okay. We'll remove the other right lines so that we can follow it around. Yeah. Okay. So what we are doing is we have some information within main workflow city that we are passing into this argument called city. Now, within the sub workflow, we are changing the information of city to ABC. So when this sub workflow execution completes, we will have a completely different value for main workflow city. Okay. So let's test that out. Oh, we already have passed our time. Okay. So you see, main workflow is coming as CED, right? We go in. City is ABC now. We come out. We check main workflow city again. It's now ABC. Okay. So in out, what does that do? It basically does the bidirectional thing, or basically it's in and out combined. Okay. Yep. We've covered this as well, importing workflow, importing data from workflow and one workflow to another. Any doubts with variables or arguments up until now?
Yeah, can you tell any situation for in-out argument direction?
In-out argument directions, let's say kind of where, there is a place where we have to add more data to our information. Let's say we want to do a city plus ABC, right? What this is going to do is we have CED and we want to add on to that information and then bring that information back into our main workflow, do some further processing. So it kind of depends from situation to situation. In-out arguments are used so that we can, follow that information in a more streamlined manner. So basically what we are doing is we're using the same variable, main workflow city, to handle all of the changes that is happening with this, right? Even if it is going into this sub workflow, even if it is going into some other workflow, once coming back, it will have the latest data after it has been processed by our sub workflows. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, if you just, I'll just quickly show this. We have CED up until now, right? We run the workflow, our, city variable or city argument becomes CED and then an ABC. And our main workflow also becomes CED and ABC. So, we added on to that data, right? Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So should I move on to imports? Imports, which should not take much time. Yeah, we just have 2 more slides. Okay. So imports basically are, do you understand what namespaces are? Anybody, any idea what namespaces are? What are they used for? No?
Are like libraries?
Yes. So basically, whatever we are doing, packages in Java, I'm not very good with Java, but I'm assuming it's the same thing. Any Java experts here? I think Shubhanu is a Java expert. He can answer. Yeah. So that's right. Kind of libraries or kind of packages or basically sets of, codes or sets of chunks of codes that are already existing out in the world and are, approved by Microsoft and all these, big coding companies. We have all of that here. And what namespaces do is they allow us to carry out whatever these activities we're doing, right? We are using a string. Why are we able to use a string? Because we have the system namespace imported, right? So these are basically the background libraries that are working in the background so that we can carry out all of these activities within our workflows. So we don't really have to write code or information from scratch, like from, binary level scratch. All of this is already within these namespaces. All of the code or subcodes are within these namespaces, and we just have to focus on our automation and our requirements, and the background stuff is happening thanks to these namespaces. Okay. Now, if you want to add any further namespaces, what you can do is add or delete. What you can do is select a particular namespace, right click, you can delete. And if you want to add some new namespace, let's say I put in link system data .sql or Oracle clients or anything I want, I can put in those namespaces like this. Okay. Another way of adding namespaces into your project is we go into data manager. So here, if you see, we have namespaces. We can just click on the 3 dots and start adding namespaces. You can find a huge amount of namespaces to choose from, and you can use that. Okay. And that's all about imports. Generally, we, don't really have to configure much of imports because a huge amount of, imports and namespaces are already imported within any basic process, right? As you can see, most of the things are already here. If there is anything you further need, you can just, go ahead and add that up. There are further ways to do it, like manage packages, but that's for a different session altogether. So I won't go into that for today. So that's all about namespaces. Moving on to the best practices when it comes to naming conventions. So if you remember, Shukla was talking about how we should not be giving ambiguous variable names or ambiguous names to any sort of variables or arguments. This kind of comes under the naming conventions. Whenever you are naming a variable, let's first talk about variables. You should always use proper readable information. You should not use like A1, A2, P3, because if somebody else reads your code, they won't be able to understand, okay, what is basically A1? What kind of information does it hold? Does it hold, somebody's name? Does it hold somebody's country? What does it hold, right? So we should always use proper casing as well. Like, for example, what is a snake case? Snake cases are you just put in an underscore between your words, that becomes a snake case. Upper or lower camel case, you use capital letters for the first letters of the words, or you just use, the lowercase or the uppercase. That's how you can use that. It just gives a little bit of readability. Always name your variables nicely, guys. When you're working on, huge automations, just having ambiguous names, that becomes a really difficult task for whoever is trying to study your code and read your code, no matter how good of an automation you've created. So always follow these naming conventions. These are the best practices you should constantly follow. Okay. Pascal case, same thing, you keep your capital letters in the front. You can use numbers in between, stuff like that. Kebab case, it uses a hash, a hyphen in between. Okay. Now coming to arguments, you can see arguments have, we should always name them using the direction of that particular argument. So for example, within our sub workflow, how did we create? Address, we just put in, right? So this should have been ideally created as in_address. This should have been as, since this is an in out right now, I should have put in IO_city. Okay, in out. Town, it should be in_town. If we have an out argument, whatever argument it is, we should put it as out_argument. Okay, so this improves the readability of your code, and anybody looking at your code here, they can also identify, okay, so for example, if I use two assigns side by side and I put an university name here, people will be able to understand which one is a variable and which one is an argument, right? Because this one starts with an IO and this one is a generic information without any underscore kind of a activity. So that's basically it. That's basically the concept of naming conventions and best practices you should be following when you are naming your variables and arguments. Any questions, doubts here?
So you have mentioned this snake case, this different type of cases, right? Case kind of thing, right? So when we will use this arguments, we know that we need to declare with the in_underscore name, but this case is, how.
So this is valid for both variables and arguments, right? So if you see the way I've set up my arguments is, I'm also using, let's say, if I create an argument here as first name, I generally use Pascal case. That is what I'm, used to and in the habit of. So I use in_first name, right? Now, if I show you my variables, I've always used Pascal case. I've kept the capital first letter of the words as capital. Okay, so it's used in both cases. I mean, the choice is yours. Any of these casings you can use. It's nothing like, this is used in this case and this is used in that scenario. Nothing of any of these cases you can pick and choose whatever you are comfortable with. But whatever you're choosing, just stick to that. You just don't have a Pascal case and a kebab case, then camel case. Don't have a mixture of all of that, because it reduces the clean look of the code, and it's kind of all over the place basically. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, or should we move on to the quiz quickly? Okay.
I have one question.
Yeah.
For a workflow, how many steps do we need to have? Because we are using the subcategory two flows, right? With the help of arguments, you're passing the variable, you're bringing that data from to the main, right? So for the workflow, how many steps actually it's recommended to do?
So there's no such thing as a recommended steps. It's kind of based on your intuition, I would say, and how you want to structure your automation project overall. You can have, 1, you can have 10, you can have 1,000. But basically how workflows should be worked as, let's say you are working on multiple applications. Okay, you have within one automation, you have to automate Excel, you have to automate emails, and you have to automate your Chrome browser as well. Okay, 3 applications you are automating. What you can do is you can divide those into workflows. You can have one workflow that works on the Excel part. You can have one workflow that works on the email part. You can have one workflow that works on the Chrome part. And then, however, is the steps, like for example, if you have to automate the Excel part first, you put that one, that, invoke workflow file first, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of up to you how you want to break your entire automation into chunks that is a lot more, streamlined and kind of smooth flowing, right? So that's up to you. There's no, recommended.
Basically, if your workflow will be in a small format, then it will be easier for you to understand as well. So separate those XAML, like for particular some process or particular some cases, you have to like give some workflow name according to the process or sub processes, and then you can go with the workflow.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that was all about today's session. Let's have a quick quiz. See how much.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Actually, not from today, from yesterday. That what is the difference between sequence and workflow?
Yeah, Apurvo, are you there?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
So the basic difference between sequence and workflows are, so let's suppose you are having 2 types of projects or process. One is very similar or very straightforward, or one is having many types of decisions and all, right? So once your process is very straightforward, then you will be using sequence, because in sequence, Gitanjali, if you can go to UiPath Studio and show them. Yeah, so in sequence, whatever activities you will be adding, so those activities will be added one by one in the row wise. Okay, if you see the first assign activity and the second assign activity, so it will be added one by one. Okay, and if you are having multiple decisions, so you need to add if else conditions over there, right? And your code will be very messy if you are using sequence while you are having multiple decision making conditions. Okay, but Gitanjali, can you please take one flowchart?
Yeah, let me add a flowchart.
Yeah, so if you are your process is having multiple decisions, right, and you are using flowchart, so you will be having a scope to use your basic activities here and there. So Gitanjali, can you just put any activity in that main flowchart? Yeah.
Yes, so that I understand that in flowchart, if I have true false any condition, then I used to use flowcharts. If I any
no, so
sequential...
not only that, so you can use the true false condition in sequence as well, but once your once your process will be very much you can say difficult in logic making conditions, then your code will be very messy if you are using sequence. So that's the so that's the overcome in flowchart over the sequence.
Okay.
So you can use anything, but just to look your code a very understandable one for the decision making things, you need to use the flowchart. That's it. Okay. But you can again insert any flowchart into any sequence, or you can do the vice versa. Like in flowchart, you can add the sequences as well.
Yes. And state machine, if I have used more than one decision, then I use state machine, right?
No, not like that. So state machine is used once your things will be, let's suppose, you are having some you can say enterprise level solution. Okay, and if you are having many items to go with one by one, then it will help you to go with the state basis. Let's suppose you while your process is transaction basis. Okay, let's suppose you are having a processing of emails, and you are having, let's suppose, thousands of emails or even 50s of mails. Okay, so now you are having transactions. For each email, you need to do something, right? So then you can use the state machines, because state machine is suitable for transaction level solution. But once you are using the sequence and flowcharts, those are basic level of solution they can provide.
Okay. And workflow?
Workflows is nothing but the kind of, means it's you can just say it's an umbrella under which the sequence flowcharts, these things are coming.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so workflow is the mother of these things.
Okay. Okay. All right. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other discussions? Okay, let's move on to the quiz and then quickly wrap up. Yeah, just you guys can scan this QR from your phones or go to menti.com and use this code. Yeah. Let me know if you guys are in and I can start the quiz up.
Yes. Should I enter the code here?
Yeah. I see 12 people have joined. I'll wait for another minute and then we can start. Yeah. Okay, 26 people have joined. Are there anybody else who are trying to join right now, and so that I can wait for another minute, or we can start? Okay, people are still trickling in. Let's wait. Okay. I think we have a good amount of people joined in now. If there's anybody else who's trying to join, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm starting the quiz, okay?
Guys, please feel free to join this quiz. Based on this quiz, you will be having UiPath swag. And so don't hesitate to join this quiz, okay? And you can just check your learning till now.
Okay. The question is going to be difficult.
Yes, it's very difficult.
No matter if you will be enjoying these questions,
yeah,
no matter if the questions will be difficult or not.
It's everything, whatever we've studied from this PPT, everything is from that. So don't worry.
Okay, thank you. I'm unable to find the yesterday's recordings in my email. Is there any way you guys can help me out on that?
I think Apurva has replied to your comment that you will be finding that session by like that recording or PPT by tomorrow morning. Okay. So you have to check the session page.
Yeah, Sukla, sorry. So for the last 3 sessions, we have already uploaded the recordings. So you can have in the event page. So only the PPTs are left. So please allow us time for till tomorrow morning. So we'll be uploading the PPTs as well. But the recordings for the last 3 sessions, you will be having on the session page itself. Please have a look.
I think Yeah, she need PPT. Okay, that you will get by tomorrow.
Start the quiz, guys.
We'll get an email notification, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. So 27 people answered correctly, 5 got it wrong.
That's
It's
nice.
okay. Good job, guys. Let's see who's at the top. Okay, Arijit is at the top. Okay, perfect. Moving on to the next question.
Okay, I'm at 23rd. Oh my God.
That's okay.
No problem. Yeah.
Yeah, moving on to the next question, guys. Warm up your thumbs. Let's get ready.
Yeah.
34 people are ready. Let's start. What would be the value of full name? Just check the workflow closely. Try to see what should be the answer. It's a simple string manipulation. It's okay if you get it wrong. I understand completely. These are okay. Okay, so a lot of people got this one wrong. Yeah. So before we move on to that, why was it Tom Cruise and not Tom Space Cruise? You see, with strings, if I show you here, how what we were doing is I intentionally added a space here, right? When we are, appending strings to one to the other, we have to be very intentional with our spacings and stuff. So if you check the question, it did not have any spacings separately, which is why there will be no space and it will be just Tom Cruise. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. New leaderboard.
I'm at yeah.
Nice. Okay. Question 3.
Can I have two variables with the same name under two nested sequences? Two variables, no.
Okay. Nice. This one was a difficult one. A lot of people got it right. Good job, guys. Yeah. So the answer will be no. I can quickly show you why so that we don't spend a lot of time. Yeah. Going into main, let's say I put in another sub workflow, right? Or sub sequence within this. And I try to create another middle name. Creating a new variable, Control K, middle name, enter, give it something else, K or something. Now, this is not throwing much errors, right? But if I go into variables, you see I'm getting warning signs that a variable of this kind, this name is already declared within scope. So what did we discuss? From the biggest scope, we can, bigger scopes are valid within the smaller scopes, but smaller scopes are not valid within the bigger scope. Now, since we had a middle name inside the bigger scope, it was valid within our sequence as well. So when we created a new variable, it gave us a warning that, hey, this is, not going to work. Okay.
What is here? Sequence is a bigger scope. It's like a parent, or main sequence is a child.
Yeah, you can say that. So this main sequence is the first sequence that we have for the automation, right? And within this main sequence, we have another sequence, right? So if you see in a hierarchical format, this encompasses the entire automation, while this sequence only encompasses this one assign statement. This has nothing to do with whatever is happening outside of it, right? Which is why this is the smaller scope and this is the bigger scope. And if you check the middle name within this, you see, you can increase the scope, right? Now this is going to give us a completely big error that this already exists. Please choose a different name. So we can choose to delete that. Okay, that was the whole point of this question, just to, show you the nuances. Yeah, let's check. Okay, magical rhino. Oh my god. Okay, such wonderful names. Okay, question 4. Start. Okay, everyone has voted. Moving on. Oops. Previous slide. Let's see. Yeah, the answer is Control K. Correct. Okay, good job all. Last 2 questions. Let's get these over with. Yeah. Okay, good job. We will be using arguments. That's correct. Checking the leaderboard. Nice. Okay, last question. This is kind of a follow-up to our 5th question. So remember what you just answered.
It should be.
Okay. So you all were attentively listening then. Good for you. Okay, we have the final leaderboard and Arijit wins. Congratulations. Yep. That is all from my end. We can, have a little bit of chit chat if you want, ask some further questions, but yeah, that was all.
Last 2 questions are confusing for me. In the arguments email, I thought it is in. Whether it's in or out, I got confused.
Oh, that's okay. It's because, start playing around with arguments and variables in your studio now that you guys all have UiPath Studio installed. Start making small workflows like this. Start exploring how can we use, what kind of variables can we use. You can make small calculators, you can make small games or anything, very small workflows you can start creating something of this, just so that you get familiarized with variables and arguments and how they work. So yeah, that is all for today. Any questions? Or
tomorrow also will be same time the session, or it's going to be different time?
Yes, I
same
think.
time, I think, yeah, from 8 p.m. there will be
Yeah,
another
okay.
session. Yeah. I think we need to wrap up then. Thanks, Gitanjali, for amazing session. Okay, so I think we all have learned so much thing from this session from Gitanjali, right? So
Yes.
really appreciate your effort, Gitanjali, and thank you everyone for your like you have spent a lot time with us, and I hope you have learned something from this session. And we have all other session as well. Kindly join those session for your knowledge in UiPath. Yeah, I think we are good. So anything else, or I can wrap up this session? I think we are good to go. Also, you can reach us on LinkedIn if you have any doubt or queries. Okay, I will paste this to profile link with you so that you can reach us too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye. Have a
Gitanjali.
good night. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Shukla.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Bye.
Subarno, Apurvo, and
Thank you,
everybody. Bye
Gitanjali. Thank
bye.
you, Shukla. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.